From 1976 to 1981, George Rafael Videla was the president of the junta regime in Argentina, with help from the US to prevent the spread of communism in Latin America. With a grueling fist, Videla would set up two factions of the military: the juntas, rulers, and caudillos, military chiefs. This was a tumultuous time for Argentina, and Videla would eventually find out how hard it was to enforce his rule on the civilians and the military, and he would attempt to consolidate power. The Dirty War was the nomenclature for the disappearances of political opponents to the regime, which riled up the public. The Beagle conflict was next, a politically tense quarrel where Argentina and Chile were arguing over who had naval control over the Beagle Strait. Finally, the Falklands War, viewed to be a response by Videla because of the amount of protest happening in the country, was a full-on conflict between Argentina and the UK. In an attempt to surge nationalism throughout the country, Argentina lost this territory and chaos ensued. People demanded the removal of the regime and a return to the democratic system, which is where Raúl Alfonsín would come in and rise to power with a new party, the Radical Civic Union.
Did the junta regime allow Alfonsín to pursue an election?
No, but their hand was practically forced into letting it happen. I mean, when you not only have civilians, but also the military, which has been the driving force pursuing your ambitions, there's not much you can necessarily do. That's not to say that they weren't trying their hardest. In fact, of the two main political parties that drove this election, that being the Radical Civic Union, or the RCU, and the Justicialist Party, the latter received much support from the regime, often censoring rhetoric coming from the RCU, and with that Alfonsín himself. But the RCU kept garnering support to have the most voter turnout that Argentina has ever seen in its history, allowing for Alfonsín to surge power away from the juntas. As can be seen from the map, the North and the South happen to be polar opposites, either voting blue, Justicialists, or red, the RCU. There are important exceptions to keep in mind. San Juan is the green on the map, voting for the Blockist Party. Tucumán, the second smallest and most densely populated province in Argentina, was the biggest supporter of the Justicialist Party. Santa Cruz was one of the only provinces in the deep south of Argentina to vote for the Justicialist Party. Tierra del Fuego, an archipelago in South Argentina, saw the RCU barely winning, with some of the most violent protests in Argentina at this time. Finally, Buenos Aires, where Alfonsín was born, was the biggest supporter for the RCU. As history would tell, the RCU would come out of this election with a victory, and Alfonsín the new president of Argentina.
He must have been very popular then.
Absolutely. And another thing about it is, was he able to maintain that popularity? And that's much harder to answer, I think. I mean, for one, he was a socialist democrat. Yes, you're getting out of this decade of oppression, so there's just a lot for Alfonsín to fix according to his policies. And he just may have had too much ambition. Secondly, the question of the day for people is, where are the people who disappeared? And the other concern is there going to be justice? So there's just many, many issues that Alfonsín has to, face. And you also have the U.S. being very present during this time. You just lost to the U.K. in the Falklands War. Because of the Beagle conflict, Chile and Argentina don't have the best relations. In fact, the Pope from the Vatican actually comes in to stop this potential war from happening. There's an economic hardship. The Dirty War happened, which of course relates to the disappearances. So I think Alfonsín would soon find out how dire these people were for change. You still had ex-military fighting against this new system, as well as constant pressure to bring justice to these perpetrators. I think he found out that the time limit he was given on his term was not enough to adequately suit the needs of everyone. I mean, this stuff takes time. One of Alfonsín's first initiatives was to set up the National Commission on the Disappearances of Persons, or CONADEP. Although many of the disappeared people were claimed to be dead or exiled by the ex-military regime, CONADEP was more focused on bringing the perpetrators to justice, and that's what happened. Almost 9,000 names were found, and many were put on trial, and it was the first time leaders from a regime were tried in international court since the Nuremberg trials. The US, despite setting up the regime under Kissinger and Nixon, aided them in uncovering the human rights violations, and the US would become a good ally with Argentina. Also, Alfonso would meet with Pope John Paul II, where he wanted to pursue a resolution to the Beagle conflict. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1984 would eventually come out of this, where Argentina had control of the Beagle Strait, and to this day, Chile and Argentina have a good relationship. Still, there were many issues within Argentina, such as poor education wages and economic hardship, insurgencies around the country, criminal networks, and courts filling up. Regardless of this, it must be stated how important Alfonso was as a political figure. Without him, Argentina could have seen a full-scale war with Chile and may not have become a democracy. Argentina is still looking for complete justice today, but Alfonso took that first step.